Nothing is truly original. Everything is inspired by something. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is just how creative storytelling works. We all know that the original Star Wars was based on spaghetti westerns and Japanese historical films. And speaking as a creator myself with several books under my belt, I can tell you you don't always realize where your inspiration is coming from until somebody points it out to you. I had a character with a very distinct personality in one of my books, and it wasn't until someone pointed out to me that I realized that his personality was very much inspired by a very famous dragon from another book. But where am I going with this? You have a town, a village, a farm. This farm has someone whose job it is to protect it. The stranger comes into town, and the protector of the town, the village, the farm, braces the stranger, and something happens. Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today we're going to be taking a look at Skeleton Crew, a particular scene in episode 4, and how that scene ties back through 200 years of English literature and storytelling. Thematically united by grit and courage, and aesthetically united by a greasy peasant shirt and a hot dad bod. There will be mild spoilers through Season 1, Episode 4 of Skeleton Crew, so if you don't want any of those, you can click away. I'll give you some time now by telling you to go check out the links below the video to get yourself a copy of my book, Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, Short, Absurd Science Fiction Stories. So, Season 1, Episode 4. They're just about to land on the planet at Akron, which they think is home, but is not their home. It's a whole story plot. Not important. What is important is that on the ship, you now have isolated Jod, or Captain Silva, or Crimson Jack, or whatever his name is. The kids aren't sure now. And the very suspicious, but actively brain-damaged, SM-33. Smee, named after a famous pirate from Peter Pan. But in this case, it's important to notice what Smee, or SM-33, represents here. Smee is the adult on the ship. Smee considers it his job to protect whoever is currently the crew of the ship. Smee has given his loyalty to the kids, and Smee is going to do his best to protect them. Damaged memory cores and all, in accordance with what Smee remembers of the pirate code. Because of this, Smee considers Jod a threat and is constantly keeping an eye on him using babysitting mode. So when Jod is poking around the ship pretending to be useful, Smee is naturally suspicious. And they have this moment, the moment where Smee, the community protector, braces the suspicious stranger who's wandered into camp. Smee walks up to Jod, stands up to his full height, tries to, makes a good go of it, but Smee's taken a lot of damage. Poor droid needs the repair bay bad. And Smee looms over Jod for a moment, but Jod just smiles up at him enigmatically, gives Smee nothing to work with, and eventually Smee has to back down, coming out not necessarily the loser out of the confrontation, but definitely not having achieved his goal of intimidating or even understanding Jod better. As soon as I saw that scene, I said, aha! I know where the inspiration for this comes from. Now, my wonderful viewers, I ask you to bear with me because we're going on a long, long journey. 200 years back in time and all the way over to Switzerland. Now, in Skeleton Crew, we have a theme. Parents doing their best to take care of their children. They have them protected behind the barrier, the big green thing they see at night that keeps people from going in and out, except, for this one particular ship for some reason. And they have, as we learned in episode 4, these big guns on top of the school, but the kids don't know about them. Presumably some of the adults know about them, but they haven't used them in generations. And at risk of giving mild spoilers for the rest of the season if you haven't seen it yet, it's ultimately when the barrier fails, when none of the adults know how to respond to a pirate attack. It is the kids who have to defend the place using what their parents have given him. Wim's father gave him empathy and a sense of adventure. Fern's mom gave her an expert level at rules lawyering and a backbone that will not quit. KB's mom gave her an attention to mechanical detail and the ability to not only repair herself and maintain herself, but how to communicate her needs clearly to her friends, when KB chooses to use that. And Wim's parents gave him this unconditional love and support and affection that allows him to, quite frankly, be the only truly well-rounded sapient being in the main cast. And each of these elements come into play in saving the kids' lives and therefore saving at and during the series. Again, bear with me. I promise we're coming back to the scene in the ship where Smee braces Jod. So, the theme, one of the main themes of Skeleton Crew is that as important as it is to build real protection, actual barriers and walls and defenses, to protect your children, it's even more important to give them the skill sets, to give them the outlook that will allow them to defend themselves, because eventually you're not going to be there for your kids anymore. They are going to have to stand on your own, and the better you prepare them for that, the better off they'll be. This was the principle of a man named Johann David Wyss well over 200 years ago in Switzerland. He had 4 sons. And he decided that he wanted to teach them these values that would allow them to survive in a rapidly changing world. Because 200 years ago, 1815, the world was in a rapid state of change. Nations were being born and dying. Technology was dramatically changing. And so he sat down and he wrote a book called The Swiss Family Robinson. It was let me get this straight. Johann David Wyss handed the manuscript off to his son, Johann Rudolf Wyss, to be edited, and then handed off to another son, Johann Emanuel Wyss, to be illustrated. It was a family endeavor. Why am I talking about a 200-year-old fiction book called The Swiss Family Robinson? Again, bear with me, it'll come back. The Swiss Family Robinson book was a success, long term. I don't know how it sold on its first or its second printing, if Johann Wyss ever got any money for it, but I do know that it was altered into plays, into movies, into television series. Disney took it up in the 60s and made the Swiss Family Robinson. And then someone took it up again and made Lost in Space, which was obviously based on the Swiss Family Robinson. There was the 98 movie with all of its controversy. This is a story that's been told again and again and again. It's a story with legs. It's a good story. Which all came about because a father wanted to prepare his sons for what was going to come. Fast forward another 60 years. Another father is hanging out with his son, having fun, and they start drawing a map together. And they call this map Treasure Island, and they mark an X where the treasure is hidden, and they start telling each other stories about pirates and adventure. And this father, he also wants to make a gift to his son, and so he writes Treasure Island. Treasure Island, where a young boy gets to go off on an adventure that involves pirates, just like Swiss Family Robinson did, and being trapped on an island. This is where you get the character of Ben Gunn, and very importantly, this is where the character Captain Flint, the dread, ruthless pirate, is born. And again, this is a story with the legs. That original book is taken, it's turned into plays, movie, TV shows, cartoons, anime, manga. You pick any decade between 1860 and the modern age, and you're going to find at least one version of this story actively circulating. Again, bear with me, we're coming back to that scene in Skeleton Crew episode 4. Fast forward to about 150 years from the original publishing of Treasure Island, and you get the story Black Sails. live-action television serial starring Captain Flint in his heyday, set 20 years before Treasure Island. It's a darker, grittier. And who do they get to play the character Captain Flint? An actor by the name of Toby Stephens. And they figure out really quick that Toby Stephens looks really good when you dirty him up and show off his dad bod. So they spend a good part of the show with him prancing around in a peasant shirt, couple of guns strapped to him, covered in dirt and grease. Did I watch the show? No, didn't know it existed until after the fact, because the show came to an end in 2017, and Toby Stephens, fresh off of this episode about being a pirate for a show based on Treasure Island, gets called in to become a sailor, not a pirate, mind, on another show, Lost in Space 2018. And if you know the history of Lost in Space, you know that it was based off the Swiss Family Robinson. So here you have Toby Stephens shifting from one story based on a 200-year-old story to another story based on a 200-year-old story. But in this case, he's the patriarch of a family. He's playing John Robinson. Did I watch the show? You betcha. You can go back on my channel and see the videos that I did episode by episode praising the show to the high heavens. I really, really enjoyed it. And again, these directors were not ignorant of the fact that Toby Stephens looks really good, dressed down and greased up. And if you want to look at the screen, I've put up comparison pictures of Toby Stephens as Captain Flint and Toby Stephens as John Robinson. Anyway, without any major spoilers for the show, you have John and Maureen Robinson and their 3 kids on their ship, the Jupiter. It's a colonial transport ship. They're moving out to Alpha Centauri, and they get lost in space due to shenanigans. During which, now in the original Lost in Space, the robot was an Earth-produced helper robot that they were supposed to be taking with them. In this new 2018 version, darker, grittier, this is actually an alien robot who just kind of shows up on the same planet they're crashed on. And they don't know anything about him. All they know is that their ship crashed for an unknown reason, and then this robot shows up. Saves a couple lives, and so they're not just going to get rid of him. But while the rest of the family seems to either be accepting or ignoring this robot, John Robinson, being a Navy SEAL, believe me, that's the sailor aspect is definitely referenced repeatedly in the show. The directors of Lost in Space, the writers, they were not above playing off the popularity of black sails. So anyway, John Robinson, being a former Navy SEAL, sees this robot as a potential threat. In fact, he's probably the only Robinson who truly understands anything about what's going on because he's able to look at the robot objectively. But there's this scene where the robot is wandering around the Jupiter, presumably helping, but John thinks he's being suspicious. So John Robinson kind of braces the robot. Or tries to anyway, but he's shorter, he can't really loom over the robot. It doesn't really go the way John Robinson was hoping. And the robot just kind of pulls a fake out, doesn't give any response, and wanders off. The show ends in 2021. And then we have Skeleton Crew, which starts up 2024. Now, Skeleton Crew obviously takes a lot of inspiration from both Treasure Island and Treasure Planet, from that 200-year generational media mythos that's in the popular mind. And while most of its inspiration comes directly from the 80s and 90s, from the Amblin Entertainment era, you probably see where I'm going with this now. That scene where John Robinson braces robot from the 2018 Netflix version of Lost in Space is very, very clearly an inspiration for the scene in episode 4 where Jod is braced by SM-33. You have things reversed. Instead of the human trying to protect this crew of 4 other people, you have this droid who is built by humans, or by humanoids at least, for human use, trying to brace this mysterious pirate that they know nothing about, who just showed up with them on this spaceport. And as far as SM-33 is concerned, nobody's really taking this threat seriously, just like John thought in the Lost in Space. And just like the Lost in Space episode, the bracing doesn't really go down the way that Smee intended it to do. He can't spook Jod. Jod's just too calm, and Jod just kind of smiles enigmatically and doesn't give him anything. So you have this strange mirror of the original scene in Lost in Space showing up in Skeleton Crew. 3 distinct stories. Swiss Family Robinson, Treasure Island, Star Wars, all kind of holding hands in this circle of mutual inspiration, feeding off of each other, but all circling around to this main theme. The people who need to be protected, the 4 children on the Onyx crystal, the Robinsons, who John Robinson was trying to protect, the young, what was his name? The kid in Treasure Island. Jack something and his mother. Jack and Mrs. Hawkins. Anyway, these people, be they children or families who need to be protected. You can't just rely on the physical barriers to keep them safe. You have to give them the skills that they'll need to survive. Again, Fern got her rules lawyering from her mother. We see that pretty clearly. KB learned how to fix things. They didn't make her dependent on just doctors. They taught KB how to not only fix herself, but how to instruct others to fix herself. Wim was just given all of the love and support he needed to be a very well-rounded person who could just deal with other people and communicate with other people way better than any of his friends. And Wim was given a sense of adventure and a desire to be friendly. But what do you think, my wonderful viewers? Do you think that the scene in Skeleton Crew episode 4 was directly inspired by the scene in Lost in Space 2018? Do you see the Swiss Family Robinson, Treasure Island, and Star Wars kind of wringing their hands and dancing around in a fantastic game of Ring Around the Rosie? Or am I just saying things here? Hit that like and subscribe button. Tell me what you think in the comments below, and peace out, my wonderful viewers. Step into a world of science and of story, of laughter and of tears. Betty Adams has crafted entire worlds of science fiction and science fantasy adventure in her Humans Are Weird series and in her Dying Embers series. Be prepared to laugh, cry, and become absorbed. Check out her books at the links below the video.